So it is my pleasure to welcome the moderator, Mr. Balaji Ganapathy. He's head of workforce effectiveness at Tata Consultancy Services. So come on up, Balaji, to the stage. The panel is yours.
Thank you, Chuck, and good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to lead this private sector panel. I know we dived deep into the discussions early on, very invigorating conversations about the future of work, the role of academia, the role of private sector, as well as public-private partnerships. And these are the themes that we are going to explore as part of this panel. We're going to explore how leaders across industry are investing in building an adaptive workforce for the evolving future of work. And in order to do that, please join me in welcoming an esteemed panel of leaders from different walks of life, but all who are most equipped to talk about the role of the private sector in addressing this key issue. First and foremost, let me welcome Mr. Jim Murren, Chairman and CEO of MGM Resorts International. Please give him a big hand. Jim. Mr. David Cohen, Senior Executive Vice President and Chief Diversity Officer of Comcast Corporation. The Honorable Gordon Smith, President and CEO of the National Association of Broadcasters. And Mr. Ernie Stevens, Chairman of the National Indian Gaming Association. Thank you all for joining us. And I want to put this in motion by jumping right in the conversation. Before we talk about solutions and what kind of solutions can address this issue, I think it's important, given the kind of experience and diverse perspectives that these leaders bring, to hear from them. What is changing? What is being disrupted? So this is the opening question that I want to pose to all of the panelists. From your unique perspective as a leader of your company, your industry, what do you see as the tectonic shifts that are happening? And how is it disrupting the nature of the workforce that we need to have to be able to harness those opportunities? Let me direct this to David first.
All right, well, good morning, everyone. It's great to be out here. And so I think I'm representing the largest company here. We have 184,000 employees. I do not know each of them personally. But I think I would point to three important, I don't want to call them all Teutonic, but they are big shifts that are occurring that have impacts on our workforce. The first is growth of the company, and normally growth by acquisition, and growth by acquiring companies that are often quite different culturally than the existing workforce. So, we started by acquiring AT&T Broadband, which was a guppy swallowing whale transaction. Then we acquired, and it was all cable. Then we acquired NBC Universal, and we married cable distribution with content. Talk about culture clash. And then last year we acquired Sky, which really made us a global company, but very, very different to acquire a big company not located in the United States. Second big trend is technology and the advance of technology. As I like to say, we are not your mother's cable company anymore, that when you sign up for cable, some guy shows up with a big drill, puts a hole in your wall, runs a wire through, and screws it into the back of your television set. Our technicians now are engineers, and they are expert at the technology that they are installing, and it's not just video, it's video and broadband. So technology and the pace of technological change is a big tectonic change for us. And the third is competition. and we are facing competition across every single one of our business lines, and competition makes us better, but it is something we have to manage with our employees because it can be very disruptive to a workforce and create consternation and adjustment issues the more competition comes into play. So growth, technology, competition.
Thank you, Gordon. Thank you, David. Gordon, I want to direct this to you because David represents an important voice in this space, but you have a wider perspective of broadcast and media and entertainment. Are you seeing similar trends? What do you see as a shift in trend?
Well, since David is one of my best members of NAB, cable, but he's also a broadcaster, and because he came up with 3 tectonic shifts, let me identify 3. First is the public-private aspect. Clearly, local, state, and federal government need to continue upping their game on getting better education, pre-kindergarten through college. But then private industry has to put more into education and specific training for their industry in order to continually be investing, in our case, in our spectrum, in our local communities, and in the value of our content. So that's a public-private partnership. The next would be for us the transition from a hardware world to a software world. And we have the NAB, a large trade show just a couple weeks ago in this town. 100,000 people come from all over this country and the world. And we have seen this transition, this tectonic shift of hardware stuff to software ongoing. And so we need to, both at the public and the private level, to be pushing on the software development piece, because that's where the action is. However, when it comes to hardware, the Congress just voted for a big spectrum reallocation, and that requires television stations all over the country to redo their signals on towers. And when you do that, you need people who know how to climb towers and do basic hardware kinds of issues. And there's a huge opportunity. There's a real shortage there in order to meet these public demands, because the private sector is underemployed in there. So then the third one, obviously, we see in this age of the challenge of fake news, we need to be investing in journalism. We need to earn our credibility every day. With the decline in newspapers, broadcast journalism becomes more important. And as more entrants come in aggregating news, we have to make sure ours is the best and most reliable and most trusted news. And that then becomes our best defense for the future.
It's very insightful, and make note of these, because when you think about solutions, it's not a unilateral solution that is going to address the workforce needs. The context of what they are bringing to the table is what needs to be addressed. For example, trust is something that will need to be addressed for the third issue that you raised to be really brought to bear. I want to shift perspectives and give the chance for Ernie to echo the challenges that you see. Many of us may be familiar with the challenges that the Indian country faces, but I don't want to take that as a given. In your own words, how would you explain the challenges that you are seeing from an economic and workforce development perspective?
You know, for me personally, I had economic challenges right away. Even though I was big and strong, I was a state Golden Glove champ, and I could dunk the basketball, I couldn't find a job. And part of the reason was, in those days, this is the way my mother taught me to wear my hair. And I'm almost 60 years old. My mother would still be very disappointed I came with a haircut. She believes that's our strength and energy. So hard to find a job in the community that I lived in. But I went away and I got a college degree, and I came back, and our Indian gaming industry started to take off. We hired thousands of people from in and around the same community where I couldn't find work. And that helped to take the chip off my shoulder, because now we're employers. And some people think, like, you know, the shift of to the Indians, why do they get to game? They game because we're governments. And we've engaged in gaming since time immemorial. We've engaged in economic development with other tribes and other people in other countries since as long as anybody can remember or report through the oral tradition, oral history. But I think, you know, if you bring it right back down to the point, it really does come down to jobs. And I'm really excited because I want to try to outdo the number up here today, so I'll compete a little bit respectfully and friendly like. But Indian country is responsible for 300,000 direct jobs in our world we live in. And if you include the indirect jobs, the other forms of entertainment and different things of that nature, that number goes up to 766,000 jobs. These jobs were available during one of the toughest economic times in American history. Indian gaming did their best to keep America moving forward and get us through that. We are currently now the 12th highest employer in America, along with the likes of Amazon and Target and these folks like that. We're the 12th highest private employer in the United States of America. We're very proud of that. So where we come from, that shift is huge for me. And when you look at that number, also half of those, give or take, are non-Indians working in our world that can buy a home, pay a mortgage, buy a car, and spread those Indian gaming dollars all throughout the communities that they work and live. That's the kind of shift that's a great change for Indian country. And again, we didn't come upon this because we're just Indians living over there. We came upon this because we're governments. And the money that comes through Indian gaming, the billions of dollars that come through gaming, that comes through tribal government gaming, where the money is 100% taxed by the benefits that are brought to our tribal communities. So just a quick touch on education. You know, I went to college because I wanted to be a basketball star. At 6'4", I wasn't a big, and playing center, I wasn't a big star, but I could play. That's a whole nother story. But what I will say is that I got a degree, and the only one in my family with a college degree at the time was my grandmother. They recruited her to go back to school to preserve the Indian language because it was dying out. And she went back to college. She taught herself how to drive a car. I gave up on her. She went to a driving school. But she was in her mid-60s. She wanted to go to college and finish, and she did. She wrote a dictionary with her brother, and she digitized that dictionary, working on it till almost 100 years old. She lived to 103 years old. This is a lady who started her education in a boarding school where she was disciplined and abused and treated wrong. And that same boarding school where all 5 of my children have graduated. My wife and I have graduated, and my son, the vice chairman of the United Nations, is president of the Board of Regents. That boarding school is now a state-of-the-art educational tool for Indian country. So again, I'll go on forever, but I know I got some other folks up here that I wanted to say that's a shift for Indian country. And today we're doing well, and we're doing well with our neighbors and our friends.
Thank you for sharing that. Please. Congratulations on your success, your family's success, and the kind of values that you're instilling in the community, I think, is really valuable. I want to shift and come back to Jim here. And I want to ask 2 questions. One from a local perspective, and then as the leader of your enterprise, how do you view things? From a local perspective, if I take what David and Gordon and Ernie shared and apply that to the, you recently launched MGM Springfield, right? And you had to create 3,000 jobs. And it was in an area that was in need of jobs, but also did not have a pipeline that could readily fit the skills and the competencies and the experience that you needed. So can you share for us how you went about doing that, and then relating that to, from an enterprise perspective, how do you view that as an example of how companies in the private sector can play a role in creating the workforce in the communities where you can create those opportunities?
Well, thank you for that question. We just opened up a $1 billion resort in Springfield, Massachusetts last year. Springfield is one of America's most important cities. It was where General George Washington sited our first armory, and has been an important military base and manufacturing hub for hundreds of years. And it was once a rich city. It's heartbreaking to read some of the commentary that existed back in the 1920s and 30s, but they equated themselves to Prague and Paris, these great, rich riverfront cities. That's where Indian Motorcycle was created. That's where Singer Sewing Machine was located. That's where Smith & Wesson still is. It was rich, and they invested in culture. A couple guys named the Olmsted brothers went and laid out the whole city in an urban plan. But a lot of the cities, like where I was born in Bridgeport, Connecticut, they've fallen into a free fall economically. And so we focused our energy on Springfield in three ways. One is we wanted to celebrate that rich history and give somebody something to be proud of, and not airlift, a design idea from Las Vegas to Springfield, but make it New England manufacturing, make it their own. And secondly, as a manufacturing city, the skills needed to perform at a high level of hospitality simply did not exist. So we spent 3 years training people in an entirely new field for them. And people moved back to Springfield as a result of the fact that we were creating solid middle-class jobs. And the third thing, and this is what aggravates me about a lot of employers, is that they set goals. And that's called an escape hatch. They're aspirational. We had mandates. We said we were going to hire over half of all the employees, of the 3,000 employees, from the city of Springfield. Most of those employees had never been in a casino, let alone know how to run a resort, but we actually exceeded that. And what was the result of that? And the first time in, I think, the history of gaming, certainly in MGM's history, the day we opened, the city held a parade for us. That doesn't happen much. We don't get tax breaks. We don't get incentives to go into communities. We don't get special economic deals. We pay full boat. We expect to. But the level of pride of these employees to bring their family members in, to see them working, it creates a very, very different customer experience. And we do this because culturally we feel that's the right thing to do at MGM. But also, at the end of the day, we believe it creates a better customer experience, because if your employees are engaged, happy, feel motivated, proud, then they're going to serve the customer better. And we've always believed that nobody has to go to any of our resorts. You don't have to be here at Bellagio. We're not curing cancer here. I wish we were. But we do create experiences and opportunities for people to connect with one another, whether it's on business, with family, friends, to explore new opportunities. And that's all because of the employee experience. This property is pretty. It's an important asset. But people don't come here because of that. They come here because of the employee engagement, the employee experience. And that weaves to everything we're talking about today. But the Springfield example is but one of many that we believe makes us gives us a competitive advantage. And I see it in our retention rates, which are better than our competitors. We have lower absenteeism. We have a highly skilled workforce that wants to work here, and they know that the company stands for something. And employees today, workers today, want to know what their company stands for. It's not enough, like it was in the past, to just say, okay, I'm going to take that paycheck and move on. They will walk out if they don't believe that a company's core values are aligned with theirs, which we'll probably get into another topic we talk about in terms of diversity. But that was the genesis behind the Springfield example.
Thank you for sharing that. Is that a scalable model for you?
It is. It is. I wake up we're here today. I'm here today. Las Vegas is what it is today for many leaders, but the one I have to single out was the legendary Kirk Kerkorian. We are here. MGM was born by Mr. Kerkorian. And we try to live our lives here at MGM as what would Kirk do? Kind of a simple thing, but it's powerful. Kirk always saw beyond what was obvious. Kirk brought a young girl named Barbara Streisand here to open up the International, brought Elvis back, Frank Sinatra, brought Highlight to Las Vegas, loved sports. When I moved here 21 years ago, we were a sports desert. Now we're a sports capital with our Vegas Golden Knights. We're going to win tonight. And MGM owns the Las Vegas Aces, an elite women's basketball team, and of course baseball and boxing and UFC. We went from a place where gamblers may go on vacation to a place where vacationers may gamble. And 75% of our revenue today here of our 10 resorts is non-gaming. So it's all about trying to think beyond, what is obvious to our competitors and what people see. And it all boils down to why do people come? It's because of that employee engagement.
This is a terrific insight, because when you typically think about the topic of workforce development and you say, okay, nobody else is stepping up, education system needs the resources and the funding, communities need to be revitalized, and we always say, okay, the private sector has to step up. But this is not just you stepping up as the private sector, but you're doing this because this is going to give you a competitive advantage. This is fundamental to your business, right?
Well, look, I mean, of the employees we're talking about, 2/3 of them are minorities. Over half of my employees are from a Latino or Hispanic background. 45% of our employees in management positions are women. We feel very strongly that we need to lead by example and to reflect the communities and the world that we live in with our employees. And it's not easy. It's not easy to have these type of goals, but they're important. And our employees expect that of us. And we get heat for this. I get heat for this. So, for example, during the despicable rally in Charlottesville, the neo-Nazis coming out spewing hatred and evil and violence, we took a major stand against that. And as a result of that, I still get letters from people that believed in that cause that is so much abhorrent to what we stand for as a country. So taking social stands are important to our employees and to who we are as leaders. Having an environment of inclusion and diversity is important. Respecting everyone's point of view, whether it's political, gender, orientation, ethnicity, race, is very important. And as Mr. Krikorian would say, that's what leaders do. Leaders need to lead. We cannot rely on the public sector to figure this out for us. They're failing us on their own. It's got to be the private sector working with the public sector and with the academic community for job training skills, for innovative commitments to communities. But at the end of the day, as I said, people don't have to be in this industry. They want to be in it because we're providing that type of environment.
Thank you, Jim. And David, I think Comcast is also recognized, NBC Universal Comcast is recognized as a great employer from a diversity perspective as well. And this is not just diversity for the sake of diversity, it is truly fundamental to your business model. So can you share your thoughts, and also in that context, when you think about the changing needs of skills in the workforce, how do you address those?
Right. So I think it is safe to say that diversity and inclusion is just a core value of our entire company. And it just doesn't come from Brian Roberts, our chairman and CEO. We've been able to infuse this in every leader in the company. And our statistics match up very well with Jim's. I mean, a majority of our vice presidents and above are diverse. We've increased the number of people of color at the vice president level and above by basically 100%. since 2011. Last year, 70% of our hires were diverse, and we hire 30,000 people a year, so it's not some small sample. And I just want to make an observation that really tracks what Jim said. I mean, our headquarters are in Philadelphia, and we hire a lot of people in Philadelphia, but the vast majority of our hiring is local hiring. It's spread throughout the country. It's where our cable systems are, it's where our local broadcast stations are, it's where our businesses are located. So we have a pretty big business in Springfield, and I've spent a lot of time in Springfield. I mean, Jim describes it accurately but gently. It's a very hard-hit community, but it's a very proud community, and it's a very hard-working community, and we have found it to be a very strong community for our hiring because of the work ethic and the commitment of the people in that community to want to work, to want to learn. And I don't always phrase it in this way, but I do think the collaborative approach to finding a workforce that is qualified for any employer is the ultimate public-private partnership. Because it does require, as Rahm Emanuel said, it requires a basic quality public education to create basic skills, and then it requires an add-on to that meets the diversity of the employment needs in that community. And we shouldn't expect the public school system to figure that out on its own. We should partner with them, we should talk, we should collaborate about the different types of skills and training that we need as employers. And one of the things that aggravates me, Jim gave one of his things that aggravates him, is to hear employers complain that the public school system and community colleges are not turning out students with the skill sets that they need. Right. And I say to them, well, have you talked to anyone about that? Have you said, this is what I need? Have you said, let's partner together to make sure that kids who are graduating high school, the kids who are graduating your community college, are graduating with skills that are relevant to your employment needs? Exactly. And the answer is almost inevitably, no, I didn't think about that. And so this is just a easy opportunity for us as private sector businesses to partner with the school system, with community colleges, with colleges, to make sure that we're working together to turn out a workforce that is qualified for 21st century jobs and for the jobs that we all need today. I'm going to say one other thing, which I was actually talking to Rahm about before he came up here. This is a little bit of a bias, obviously it's my company's business, but one of the skills that basically every young person graduating high school or community college or college needs to compete in 21st century jobs are basic digital literacy skills. Mm-hmm. They need to know how to use the computers and the internet. I mean, Jim, the vast majority of your employees have to be digitally literate and know how to do that. There's things called middle skills jobs, which are dominant in the hospitality industry, and they all require basic digital literacy skills. So one of the most horrifying statistics in America today is that about 30% of Americans don't have an internet connection at home. And I couldn't see you anyway, I won't ask for a show of hands, but I've done this before, and if I ask how many of you have an internet at home, every hand in this room is going up. And all of you can imagine what you would do if your internet at home was not available. And I know what you do, because you all call us. And if there's an internet outage, our phones are ringing off the hook. So just imagine that 30% of Americans don't have an internet at home. And you'll start by saying, well, that's because of rural American, Native American, reservations, Indian country. Well, of that, let's be fully accurate, 28%. Of that 28%, about 7 or 8% are people in rural America who don't have a broadband connection built out to their homes. The other 20%, 2 to 3 times as many, have an internet connection built out to their homes, and don't subscribe to the internet. It's primarily in urban America. It's primarily poorer Americans, Americans of color. And this is why we've created, we happen to be an urban-centric cable company. We don't have any Native American reservations in our footprint. But that is why we've started the program called Internet Essentials, which is the ultimate public-private partnership. We partner with school districts, with mayors, with governors, with city councils. We partner with nonprofits like Boys and Girls Club, the National Urban League, Unidos US, and we provide the nation's largest, most comprehensive, most successful program to get low-income Americans connected to the internet. In 7 years, we've connected more than 6 million low-income Americans to the internet at home. And the reason I've said, I was talking to Ram about it, is Ram and Chicago were the first city to openly embrace this program. And Chicago, in the first year, had the most Internet Essentials connects in the program. And for every year since then, they have had the most Internet Essentials connects. And he's built it in to his public education improvement program to make sure that every child in Chicago has an internet connection at home. So I think that's the ultimate. I mean, in some ways, it is the foundational element. It is the essential for what you need for basic skills for 21st century jobs. Then you can build everything on top of it. And it's our largest community impact program. We've invested literally billions of dollars in rolling out this program, supporting it, and the digital literacy skills. By the way, so many of Gordon's members support this program through PSAs and for promoting this program. So we've reached out to everyone we know in business, in government, in quasi-government, in the nonprofit community, and I think we're moving the needle on digital literacy and digital education.
I think that's an important investment, and thanks for doing that. I've experienced that. I've met some of your colleagues who work in those programs. I think the impact that it has, especially in inner city neighborhoods, is tremendous. But when you have that infrastructure, what also follows is what kind of content, what kind of skills. Digital literacy is such a broad space, and again, all of you contextualize the needs of the workforce in your own industry. So I'm going to turn to Gordon. I mean, you have member companies that are experiencing these issues day in and day out. What kind of programs are they putting together? And what kind of skills, if you think about skills that are relevant for today and tomorrow, what would be the top few that your member companies and you from your industry would echo?
Well, let me suck up to David first and just say I totally agree with his point on we need to emphasize digital literacy. But as we do that, let's not forget the basic literacy needed for communications and math and things like that that allow you to get along in the world. It is shocking to me how often I will get resumes that are simply not legible or usable, and you just discard them. So learning how to write the King's English is actually hugely important.
I'm impressed that you still get resumes. Yeah. I get links to LinkedIn.
Well,
I mean, it's like...
and then to the point of diversity, and to your question, companies like Comcast Universal do an extraordinary job because they have scale. And they know that their greatest resources are their people, and so they invest in diversity. They even have a chief diversity officer at Comcast.
We have multiple ones, so it's right.
But there are many businesses that don't have scale, and what NAB does is try to fill that gap with a program that's literally a broadcast leadership. It's the BLT program. It doesn't stand for bacon, lettuce, and tomato. It stands for Broadcast Leadership Training, to train those who are in our industry already but don't know necessarily the specifics about how to finance a broadcast station, how to run a broadcast station, how to buy a broadcast station. And what we focus on and give priority to is accepting into our program that is literally run by our members and other outside resources we bring to teach women and minorities how to do these things as well. Because diversity, when you see every business out there, you have permits to do this or that from state, local, or federal governments. You don't even have a business in broadcasting unless you have a federal license. And when you have a federal license that says you can have a business, the federal government tends to get very focused on what it is you do and how you are trying to be inclusive of all of the American people. So we're really behind the eight ball, candidly, in making sure we get diversity of women and minorities into broadcasting. Now, sadly, and this is before my time in the Senate, there was it was called a tax certificate that minority people could get that allowed them to be capital participant in broadcasting. It should have been mended and not ended, but it was ended for budgetary reasons. It needs to be restored because the will to get more people in and trained it's not a lack of will, it's a lack of capital.
And the demand in the minority community to participate in an ownership level in our businesses is huge.
But we need this government, this private and public relationship needs to be reconnected because we have the programs. We're doing it all the time. We're graduating people. We work closely with many institutions of higher education. We work with a Cronkite School at Arizona State University. Brigham Young University has a fabulous broadcasting program. Northwestern, the same. We need to have, Jim, more relationships with universities.
Just to give you another one.
And they do reach out to us, and we need more to reach out to us to say, these are the specific skills, as David said, that we need you to teach because we can fill in the gap after they've graduated, and there's a big gap to fill in. Maybe we can do it earlier if we start coordinating better as businesses and trade associations working with higher education.
I think that model does make sense, and there are examples of where it is working and doing really well. But if I come back to the question around skills, and one of the challenges that you early on echoed is that you need to bring the trust back in journalism, right? So if that is a skill, that's a value that you want to inculcate, what kind of programs do you have today that address that in your existing workforce across member companies? Also the new generation of journalists who are coming in, broadcasters, media, employees who want to work in that space. How do you create that skill set?
I would tell you that one of the upsides of the Trump administration, and whatever your feelings are about it, people registering to take journalism classes are at an all-time high because it's so much focus and so much interest around this issue of fake news. Who is a journalist? Who can tell the story accurately? Who can be inclusive in their story? So some of it is market-driven by this president, but again, there are lots of skills that you may learn at higher education about buying and selling a business. Well, there's some minutia to how you buy and sell a broadcast business. That's where we can help and train specifically in our BLT program. And that's what we do. And this has been going for 2 decades now. We've turned out lots of graduates, and they come out of the NAB's BLT program, and they are snapped up with really good jobs right away.
If I could just add on to this, and I'm not saying this is easy, but I actually think in broadcasting, there's a tried and true skill development process. It's partnering with the journalism schools. Yep. I can't tell you how many of our broadcasters are adjunct faculty at so many schools of journalism. The point I was making that we're not communicating with the schools about what we need, that is not true in broadcasting or in journalism. There's loads of communication, and then there is a pipeline. You start in a smaller market, you get your on-the-job training, and you work your way up in the size of the markets. And even within our company, you may start in news at the Hartford NBC broadcast affiliate, and you work your way up to Miami, and then maybe to Philadelphia and Los Angeles or New York, and then you work your way up to the network. So in broadcasting, we actually have built in career paths and training within the business after people graduate from journalism programs and even journalism-related programs at the college and university level, where there's a lot of input from NAB and from NAB's members as to what the content of journalism and broadcast journalism curriculum should be.
Exactly
If
right.
I could just, I'd like to just chime in a little bit on the education. And that, as far as that footprint,
And I also want you to think about this
I got a
element
size
of
15 shoe, I just wanted to
element
say.
of trust, because I think the model that they're talking about in terms of skills is certainly something that is a great takeaway. But rebuilding trust is something that's important for any organization that wants to engage with the Indian country as well. So as you chime in on this point, can you think about that also and share your perspectives?
I think that, you know, the National Indian Gaming Association was built out of concerns about whether Native America can handle these kinds of things. And what people haven't figured out is that we've survived some of the toughest history in the world history. So the fact that we survived means that we know what we're doing, and we just have to adapt and have to plug ourselves in. And when you talk about workforce, Native Americans really helped to build America. So my uncles, they worked the high steel all day long, all weekend long. They would come home and do the tribal business at night. The Native American veterans are the highest serving per capita percentage of any minority in any conflict. And that training came home to our communities. The women, we don't have the Me Too movement issue in Indian country because the women keep us in line, they keep us in check. They are equals. And like I said, I'm in charge as long as I don't talk back to my wife. So what I wanted to just add to that is that my daughter, she had to take a few days off this week. They made her take a few days off because she had a baby last week, my 16th grandchild. She's 30 years old, studying in her dissertation phase of her doctorate degree. I wanted her to be a lawyer. She wants to save the Mother Earth, so she's in environment, in geography, geology, those are the things she's studying. But she's educated from Head Start all the way through in tribal education. And then she went to Kansas University, and that's where she's she's in her third year studying for her doctorate. Tribal colleges throughout this whole country have taken this challenge on. Because like I said, Indian country, or NIGA was born because people didn't think we could do this. Mm-hmm. They thought when we had some bingo and had some gambling going on, that would be subject to all the tough things, the bad things that come with it. Instead, we've learned from Vegas. Now Vegas is learning from us as we're equals now. I think we might have you by 1%, Jim. But we'll check those statistics later. Maybe ask Frank. But Indian gaming is the largest segment of commercial gaming. I mean, in competition, respectful, friendly competition, because we've grown together, we work together. We've taken some of your people to Indian country. Now they're coming to Vegas. Right. Those are great things, and we couldn't do that without the appropriate technology, the education. My wife and I, we didn't pay our student loans off till we're 45 years old. Now our kids can go to college through gaming dollars and scholarships up to $20,000 a year in our particular tribe. Some tribes it's different, but they get their education and training. That's our priority. And there's a lot of programs within the employment sector. Remember, half are non-Indians. In the employment sector of our industry can go to college. We are training them, and we're no different. We're putting our people to school. We're training them. And why? Why? Because we have to provide a safe, productive environment where our people could come to our casinos, our industry, and spend their recreational dollars. We like them to come back. Ours is not so much centered around the recreational as it is our tradition and our culture, but we're taking advantage of both. And we're watching Las Vegas, what they do, and now they're watching us. That's a great thing. We're partners in this world.
That's a terrific place to be at, to challenge and lead and grow and now be an exemplar for others to follow. So we are right at the end of this panel. So what I want to do is to, before wrapping up, allow each of you 15 seconds. If, I mean, this is the inaugural year for this institute and this symposium. For this sort of work to be taken forward in terms of the future of work, creating an adaptive workforce, what is one solution or one answer that you want to share, that you want the Institute and people who are gathered here to take away and work on? One thing that you would do to address this challenge of the future of work and creating an adaptive workforce? Jim?
Well, I would say that Senator Reid and Speaker Boehner personify what we need to do. We need to work across the aisle. We need to have a mission. We can't get partisanship involved. We have to be passionate about a goal, and we cannot accept the status quo. And so I would say what happens in Nevada doesn't need to stay here. And we're a can-do kind of attitude here. We're not burdened by hundreds of years of history. We get S done. You know, I see Governor Sandoval sitting in the chair there. For 8 years, Governor Sandoval got stuff done. He worked with Democrats, he worked with his Republicans, and he got stuff done. We just have to get away from this bureaucracy and say, do our kids deserve this? Do our employees deserve better? And if that's true, then what the hell are we waiting for?
Step up
Step up.
and get it done.
So I'm going to be very short because I think my point is very short, which is I think the role that this institute can have, and Senator Reid and Speaker Boehner, the role that you can serve, the role that UNLV can serve, is to take the attraction of Las Vegas and Jim's fantastic property and bring people together, even if it's only on an annual basis, the government, the nonprofit sector, the corporate community, and expose each of us to conversations about how we can work together to improve workforce development in all of our communities. It doesn't have to be in Las Vegas. There's been very little talked about on this stage that relates specifically to Las Vegas. So I think that's a great role, and because I was so short, I'm going to make one more diversity point in response to these latest comments, something I'm very proud of. So Gordon knows Valerie Stubb very well. Valerie is the woman who is in charge of all of NBC Universal's and Telemundo's local broadcast stations, 42 local broadcast stations. She is the head of that entire operation. She is Native American. And so she's the highest ranking Native American we have in our company, but she runs all of those broadcast stations.
Thank you, David. Gordon?
Well, I think if I had the wish of my heart for what this institute, the Reid Boehner Institute, can do for education and any other issue, it's already been touched upon, is to bring people together. You know, when I was in the U.S. Senate, I was a conservative Republican, but my mother's maiden name is Udall. So our family reunions were very interesting. And yet, what I think we need to somehow foster is the notion of being a Republican or Democrat, while important, is secondary to our larger interest as Americans to find solutions to public problems. The way I was defined as a moderate Republican is because if there was a legitimate public problem, and there are so many you can't even count them, and I didn't like a liberal solution, I would offer a conservative solution to the same problem. And then in working with Harry and others, gosh, it found that by Friday you had a bill you could vote on final passage. I think there needs to be more of that elevation of our nation, of our obligation as Americans, and less as Republicans and Democrats. It's not easy to do because social media identifies winners and losers every day in the loudest and shrillest of ways. And members of Congress want to represent their constituents. We need the common sense senator to speak a little louder so that we can get some things done, whether it's on education, diversity, fixing our entitlement issues, whatever. There are actual solutions out there that if we'd be Americans first and partisans second, our country would have another tremendous century ahead of it.
Well said. Well said, sir.
You know, if I could, I just want to take 1 second to introduce. I see all these bodyguards details and everything. My bodyguard was whizzing through the community, through the casino with a scooter last night. So I have the blessing of being here with the retired Senator Ben Nighthorse Campbell, who's one of America's heroes. I want to stand up and recognize. You know, what the senators taught me is to be humble, to be kind, and to care for your community. So I think that, you know, building our communities, education, technology, and training, those are the big parts that we've talked about today. So, I mean, I could go back to quotes from everybody's talking here so far today. That's what this is all about. I think it's important to not forget about our young people. There's such a, you know, and I don't want to take us down, but we really have to appreciate that there's still a lot of violence out there. The opioids, the people are having struggle, and it comes from all communities. And just the same as some of these racial challenges that are out there, we're all one place of color. We need to step up and be above all those, and we need to step up and help those people that need our helping hand. I think that's our future.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. Please join me in giving a big hand to this panel.